Thanks very much, Al. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be able to introduce the panel this afternoon. It's quite good that Al actually rejigged the order, because a session of charter brokers follows quite naturally from a session on operators, and I'm quite surprised that Al, in his provocative way, didn't entitle this "Is this the end of charter brokers?" to follow from "Is this the end of operators?" They're jumping to the conclusion that we'll reach in half an hour. The answer is going to be no, of course it's not. I think on today's session we'll have a look at how chartering works in the private aircraft sector at the moment, and then we'll have a look at the future, and we'll have a look at two things mainly: new technologies and how new technologies is impacting the way aircraft are chartered, and urban air mobility and the impact that's going to have. And we have a fantastic panel here this afternoon, who I'll introduce. So Eymeric Segard, CEO of Lunajets, on my far left. Lunajets is a private jets broker based in Geneva and was founded by Eymeric in 2007. Toby Edwards, on my immediate left, Managing Director of FLYT in the UK. FLYT being one of the first online business jet booking platforms for private aircraft. And in the middle, Andy King, co-founder of FLYT, which is the industry's first digital booking platform for helicopters. So I think I'd like to start with Toby. And Toby, so the charter brokers are one of the first interfaces that a customer will have with business aviation, probably one of the only interfaces that they're going to have with business aviation. If I'm booking a flight, I'm working in a high net worth family office. I want to book a flight from London to Moscow. What are my current options for booking that flight?
Thank you, Mark, for having me on the panel. So when I'm speaking to someone new to business aviation, of which I think we see probably 20% of our customers year on year typically haven't chartered before, I describe it as a triangle. So at the top, obviously, you've got ownership, the fewest. Then you have fractional. Then you have card programs, which entry point would probably be 25 hours. You're looking at about 185,000 euros for 25 hours. And then you have the base of the triangle, which is quite, very competitive. And in there you have the brokers, and you could probably split them more online and more traditional, but brokers. And then at the very base, there are a few brokers who offer seats as well. So if you were coming to Victor specifically, obviously we'd be the on-demand space, providing a price to take you from London to Moscow. It's a one-way, it's a pay-as-you-go, there's no upfront commitment.
But would I primarily be doing that online, or would I be ringing up a broker to speak to them personally?
Yeah, so it's certainly a combination. We're in a very fortunate position. Our CEO and founder built a very strong brand from the very beginning, which means that the majority of our clients, at least to start with, came inbound at the top of the funnel. I think traditional brokers would have gone from a more of a sniper approach, directly going after individuals. Of course, in both cases, absolutely, the majority of your clients are going to come from referrals, but you've got to begin that to start with. So they would come in online, having maybe seen our app advertised somewhere or through the website. It's omni-channel. Indeed, they can also email, telephone in, and then they would have immediately a conversation with one of our account managers or brokers. That's a know your customer call. At that point, we would ask you all the questions. Have you flown privately before? What's your preferred aircraft? Type of budget? What times do you want to fly? Do you have a preferred London airport? All of these questions. So it's absolutely critical that you pair customer service with the online platform. And I think, if I'm speaking to investors and they say, well, but we've invested in Victor, you're a tech platform, I say, absolutely. The difference, I hope, is that if you take one of the sales brokers from Victor in London, they're probably managing 250 customers by themselves. And that is only possible because of the investment we've put into the tech platform that enable them to have eyes on a lot of customers and touching at the right time, rather than perhaps needle in the haystack, trying to find that new client.
And Andy, how does it differ in the helicopter market? Is there a difference?
I think there is. I came into this industry about 2 years ago, having trained as a helicopter pilot, but came from the tech world. And what really surprised me about the helicopter market was there was almost no technology involved in booking helicopters. They fly amazing machines, and they're very modern inside. But if you want to book one, you still had to phone the operator. Sometimes they would work out the quote by hand still. And these online platforms for booking private jets really didn't cater to us as a market. So I kind of saw that there was a need for a booking platform that was only for helicopters. And they present different challenges to booking jets. Of course, when you fly in a jet, you fly from an airfield to an airfield, whereas you can land almost anywhere you like with a helicopter. And we're a lot more affected by weather, and even passenger weight is an issue which has to be taken into account when you're planning a flight. So it's still a very manual process to book helicopters, and we're trying to digitize and automate as much of that as possible, starting with the quoting process. So if you go to our website, you can enter literally a postcode, and it will give you a quote from a number of operators, like Halo, for instance, that you've heard from. And then we can then place that request with the operator, and hopefully they'll be able to take that booking.
Actually, what sort of lead time are you looking at in jets and in helicopters, roughly? If I wanted to fly out of London tonight, can I get a jet or a helicopter?
You certainly could. We default on the platform so that you can only enter a request for the subsequent day. But if you wanted to make a booking for today, then we would try to handle that for you.
Yeah, I mean, we regularly have requests in the afternoon, for example, and fly within 3 hours. I think we've had requests in, and passengers have been in the sky within 60 minutes. Obviously, there's a lot of luck, and you need to have the expertise and know which aircraft are there, and perhaps you know a plane's just landed and the crew still have time.
And Eymeric, going back to the asked question, can you really democratize business aviation? And I mean, to be honest, it's not a democracy. Last time I looked, the only democratic element in business aviation is money, isn't it? I mean, your votes in the business aviation world equal how much money you have to spend chartering aircraft. There's nothing else to stop. And I guess the question there really is, over the last 10 years, so far as I can see, online booking platforms, etc., have been developed to try and expand the market, to try and get more people flying to get the middle classes, let's put it that way, flying in business aviation. Do you think that's worked? Has the market expanded?
No, really, it hasn't. And if it had, we wouldn't be here. There would be the guy who invented this killer app doing the presentation and telling us how big his yacht is and how big his house in the Bahamas is. So no, it hasn't. There's been quite a few hypes about the Uber of private aviation, about VTOLs, about empty legs models, and none of them have worked really. We all use and try to use them. But you know, if you think about democratization of business aviation, what it means is there's two ways you can do it. Either you lower the cost, or you expand the supply. Okay, that's what Uber did. Uber didn't invent a cheaper car or cheaper fuel. Okay, what they did is they found hundreds and thousands of out-of-work or after-work car owners who were sitting in the lounge watching TV, and they told them, hey, download this app and go and get some money offering rides to people. Okay, so they really expanded the supply, which made the price go down naturally, supply demand, and that's how they Uberized the taxi market. In private aviation, there aren't, you know, hundreds or tens or dozens of jet owners sitting at home waiting to wondering how to make a bit more money with their jets. Okay, certified and with a fully trained crew. Okay, so supply is very limited. Supply will depend on, you know, Steve selling planes to more people, and that will happen with macroeconomics factors. Okay, the richer the countries and the better the stock markets happen, the more money there will be, and the more supply there will be. But even there, it's very limited. Cost-wise, I mean, yes, there was a question about low-cost airlines and how we can lower cost of private aviation. But so far, planes cost what they cost, and that's not going to change. And the fuel and the crew, that doesn't change. Do you think you could tell private jet passengers, we will lower the cost, but then you pay per suitcase that you put in the hold? No, not really. We lower the cost, but then you pay the glass of champagne you're going to have on board? No, not really. So there are incompressible costs in private aviation, and then there are expectations of that audience, that our target market, which is the 1% of the 1%, which make it impossible to reduce the cost. Okay, so margins, there's also a question of margins. Do you really want to, is 5-10% really going to make the difference? No. Okay, so it's a very difficult industry. It's a very niche industry. We've said that, and that's why I think it is not democratizable, and it will stay the way it is. And it's very difficult to do a killer app with such a small industry, because it's not a good ROI for the investment that needs to be done.
Do you think is there an amount of wealth or a particular demographic that you could say people over that, these are the ones that are going to be flying private aircraft, and below that, they're not, they're just not?
Yeah, we talked about millennials and stuff. The Bloomberg did a report last week. They identified 25,000 people around the world that weigh more than $30 million. Okay, that's our target. You multiply by 1.5 to include corporates. Okay, and that's the target you have. And it's not because they're millennials and they're young and they want to book on an app at the click of a button that they are going to go into private aviation. It's an expensive luxury, and so far there is no way to lower this price. Therefore, the bar will be set at where it is, up and down, depending, obviously, when the crisis came in 2008. Prices went down a bit because nobody was flying, so owners were desperate to charter their plane before selling it. But that doesn't change much.
But Andy, presumably the helicopter market demographic is somewhat different.
It is. I think there's a lower cost of entry for helicopters than there are for private jets, and I don't think many people realise that actually you can hire one of Will's state-of-the-art 109s, for instance, for £1,800 per hour, and that's a 6-seat, 190-mile-an-hour helicopter. And that's fantastic value, actually. And we're trying to build the message out and get that message out to more people that you can afford to hire a helicopter, and you perhaps didn't realise it.
Yeah, I think if you can't necessarily democratise business aviation, you can certainly make it more accessible. We're one of the brokers that was touched upon by the Avinode guys earlier. We have an API, so you can do an instant price on any route on our app and just see how much it would cost. My friends, people who meet me for the first time who don't know this world at all, say, how much does it cost to fly to London to Paris? And I go, well, obviously it depends on the size of the plane, how many passengers, but you can give a ballpark figure of €10,000. And they say, yeah, but so what? If I take my partner, my 2 young kids, and maybe another couple, I split the cost, €5,000, €10,000 return, weekend. Often people are surprised by how inexpensive it is. Now, obviously it's expensive, but and I agree, 30 million is probably the sweet spot, but with that said too, if you have 30 million, you spend 29 million on property in London, you don't have any money for chartering, right? And we're seeing a massive change in people on how they want to spend money. So I think if anything, it's less.
But Toby, if that was really true when in 2008 or 9, remember there was the VLJ hype. Well, not the hype, the VLJ launch. Okay, and these are VLJ very light jets, the 4-seater Mustangs. At the time, there was only the Mustangs, and this was supposed to be the revolution of mini revolution of private jets, because it was going to take the price per hour down from a light jet of about €2,500 down to 1,800, 2,000. Okay, and 10 years later, there has been no big impact. In fact, 2 big operators have disappeared. One is left, Globair, because it's really well managed and very well controlled, cost controlled by Bernard. So well done to him. We need him. We need this kind. But this was the smallest jet, two turbo engines, two pilots, to supposedly lower the bar of private aviation, and it hasn't taken off. They're still there because they're well maintained, but it's still a very luxury product. And okay, yes, if you divide it by 6 and you sell it by per seat, it's a different model. But then you're not into private aviation anymore. You're into commercial aviation in a very, 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 very small plane.
I mean, do you think? I mean, do you agree with Toby that transparency, accessibility through the use of e.g. online booking platforms creates demand, or do you think that demand is driven by wealth, and no matter what sort of transparency or accessibility on the technological side you've still got the ultimate issue of can people afford it?
Absolutely. So once they can afford it, okay, then they have different options, like Toby was saying, and where the charter broker comes in, and again, Toby said charter broker online booking platform, it's the same thing. There is no killer app. Okay, so once the charter broker, the role of the charter broker is really to give a consultation and to give advice to the passenger, because it's a very niche market and it's a very opaque market. So you look on all the websites of all the operators, there is not one price. Okay, it's really all down to so many factors that they cannot quote a price on a website. They can give an estimation on an app, but you cannot get a real price. Okay, so A. B, the operators are not well-known brands like British Airways or Air France. So when you present 2 options to the client, yes, you can give the names of the operator. One is operator ABC, the other one is DEF. You're just putting the responsibility of the choice onto the passenger, instead of saying, listen, the operator ABC, we've flown with him 18 times in the past 6 months, and our clients have rated him with 4.5 star, because we have feedback a bit like a TripAdvisor. So our clients have rated him well, so that's not bad. But our agent has rated this operator badly. Okay, and that people say, well, I don't care. Yes, but if you need to change the timing of your return at the last minute, maybe this operator is not very flexible. If you cancel your flight, maybe this operator is not going to be flexible and is going to charge you the full amount. If you want to change days, etc. So there is one thing is the service in the plane. The other one is the service in the back office, and that counts. And that's the role of the charter broker, to say, listen, we present you 2-3 options. Here are the names of the operators, but because you only fly once a month, maybe you don't know them all. Our role is to say, we recommend this one for this particular trip that you're looking for. For another trip, maybe it would be that one. And that's really our job as consultants of an opaque and dark industry that we work with.
Opaque and dark. Andy, I mean, have you set up FLYT? You founded FLYT. Have you founded FLYT to sort of envisaging the Uberization, for want of a better phrase, of helicopters, or do you agree that this is a very personalised service that can't be?
It's still a very personalised and it's a very bespoke service. We never use the Uber for helicopters description. We realised that actually we're giving people the booking tools to actually make a much more informed decision by showing them pictures of the aircraft, for instance, by showing them the details of the operator, the level of insurance, for instance, or whether they can opt for 2 pilots as opposed to 1, how much more would that cost? Whereas before, as my colleague rightly said, it was a very opaque market. You might have to go to several brokers, and then each of those brokers goes to several operators, so the operator ends up being inundated by different quote requests from lots of different brokers. By having a single marketplace, it makes it much more streamlined for everyone, and you're able to get much better information about your possible options.
I think this term Uber of private jet and Uber of helicopter was born 10 years ago, 8 years ago, when some companies raised a lot of money because they were going to be the next Uber of private aviation by copying the Uber model of the cars. And since it's been proven, because we are here, that it doesn't exist, but because the valuation of these companies are based on that hype, the image carries on and the term continues, but there isn't an Uber of private aviation.
So without wanting to sound pessimistic and conservative, especially after the conclusion on the last panel, is there no technological fix, killer app, Uberization, whatever, for the next 5-10 years on the technology side, which will revolutionize or even change the way private aviation is booked?
But some people are working on it. So far, we've seen a lot of people try and a lot of people spend a lot of money on it and not working out very well. Some are still here. Some have actually closed and disappeared. I know Stellar Lab is doing a great job in California trying to put as many variables together to make it as automatic as possible. But there are just too many variables going straight from operations to the whims of the passenger, to the whims of the owner who may or may not release his aircraft depending on whether he has his meeting in New York or his wife wants the plane to go to Milan. You know, it's so far no.
We work with the great operators in Europe, Air Hamburg, Lux Aviation, VistaJet. And without naming who, I can say that we're having very deep, interesting conversations with them about providing the API on pricing for the empty legs. And I'm not saying we want to have people flying for 2,000 euros, right? What I am saying, though, is that our average booking value is $25,000, right? And someone who's happy to fly to the south of France or to Mallorca on a private jet is probably not, at a normal price, willing to fly transatlantic. But if you can open up APIs just a little bit and be a little bit more transparent and be a bit more collaborative, I think you can certainly create a bigger market, definitely. I know you can, because, I mean, we recently flew a client from Nice to Newark, and it was on a VistaJet Global 6000. It was about 55,000 euros. He's a client, he's a customer, he flies with us, but he wouldn't have flown that route on that aircraft typically at a full charter rate, which would have been, I don't know, double that. So you can work with your suppliers and use smart tech. I don't think it's necessarily like a revamp. I think in 5 years we'll be a lot further down the line than we are at the moment. But for me at Victor, like, I wouldn't work at the business if I thought it was so doom and gloom. Every day, the team, we come in and there's just inches on how we can improve the business. And if that was in 2014, realizing that if you contact someone within 30 minutes of them registering on the app and qualifying them then rather than waiting 24 hours, it increases the likelihood of them booking for the first time by 100%, then that's a great example of an inch. You know, similarly, last year we gathered all the data for every single request, and I kind of apologize again to Avinode. We've put a lot of requests their way over the years as we've marketed on scale, but we've also collected and been obsessed with data from day one. So it wasn't like we had to change our culture. And mid last year, we basically, very simply, we put all of our data for requests into 3 buckets. And all it means now is that when someone requests a quote with Victor, it's either blue, cold, in which case it's someone who's interested in the brand. This is pretty cool, maybe looking at the estimate price. Then we have the warm requests, which we know convert a certain period. And then we have the hot requests, which this is irrespective of whether they're a customer or new. We can look at the data they've put in through the platform. Perhaps they've changed the number of passengers. Perhaps they've added the fact that they've got golf clubs, or they've put a preferred operator, or they've changed the time, or it's the aircraft, you know, the airport tools. Actually, what that means from an efficiency standpoint is that when qualifying a request, my team don't have to even pick up the phone to speak to a client to qualify that inquiry because we have the data in front of us immediately, which is why they can therefore look after 200, 300 clients, and these aren't small clients as opposed to looking after. So I'm very optimistic. We're doing a lot of stuff with BP on the environmental side of things. I don't feel it's so stagnant. I think most good brokers are already transparent now. Yeah. But
Toby, 55,000 Nice, New York is not democratization. and as you said, he was already a client who just, you find a really good deal, and so he flew private instead of business. But you're not increasing the market with 55,000 to cross the Atlantic.
I think let's have a look at increasing the market by looking at urban air mobility. But actually, just one really quick question before I answer that. Maybe to Eymeric. In the States, is the market different in the States? We're taking a very European perspective, but obviously business aviation in the States is a far bigger market altogether.
It's a far bigger market. The fleet is much older, and European clients are more used to newer aircraft, and that's why we don't have access to as many aircraft as our competitors, because we put a bar at 15 years of age. By perception of security. In the States, you can very well fly on citations from the 80s and the 90s, so we don't touch those. On the one hand, and on the second hand, yes, it is a different market, because the broker, I think, has much more power to change pilots and to change flight attendants if they don't like it within a flight. In Europe, the flight is all included, and it comes with the crew and everything together. Yeah.
So I think the bottom line question on urban air mobility is obviously going to be: is that complementary? Is that a supplement to the existing market? Or is it going to be completely separate, with a separate demographic flying completely different types of routes?
No, I think it will be a wider audience for urban mobility, but I'm here because, yes, it will be a really good complement to any private jet that lands in Farnborough, that lands in Teterboro, to have a flying pod, as I call them, to take the passengers back all the way to downtown. In addition to all the other flights that they can do that they're doing now as a helicopter. So I see it as a complement, as the last mile, with a private jet in between, because so far, and I think for the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're not going to have long-range, autonomous, long-range electrical planes. So the OEM, the private jet OEMs still have a future, and therefore we do too.
And then do you see probably the helicopter business is most under threat in inverted commas? Do you see eVTOL aircraft as a threat, or as a complement?
No, not at all. I see them as being a great opportunity to grow the market, because there is a limit in terms of the cost base of operating helicopters. It's still going to be a luxury product, whereas if we can start operating these electric aircraft, then it can reduce the cost per hour, which means the market can be much, much bigger. But I think we can start to explore the routes and start to build the infrastructure for that now by working with the existing helicopter operators, and it's good to see that they're taking an interest in these vehicles as well, because we think they'll be some of the early users of these vehicles.
Toby, any thoughts on the eVTOL market and how Victor would fit in?
We were saying over lunch, I mean, even if we get a helicopter inquiry, likelihood is we'll refer it over to a helicopter broker who specialises in brokering helicopters. It's a different story if it's a customer and they've already chartered the aircraft and it's part of the onward journey. But our app, our website, our team, they're all specialists in business aviation, not in helicopters. So I think we're in a great position as part of a wider group with Rocket Route from flight planning perspective. And obviously we sat on a load of data of high net worth individuals who I'm sure would be very interested in this. So again, I think it's very exciting, but we would stick to jets.
I think we talk a lot about our industry, the B2B, the planes, the helicopters, whatever. A charter broker, a good charter broker, is here to represent the consumer, the passenger. Okay, and in fact, the passenger doesn't want to fly from Farnborough to Nice. Okay, he wants to fly from the Royal Garden Hotel, where he's finishing his very interesting conference, and wants to go to his villa in Saint-Tropez. So our job as a charter broker is to find all the transportation systems as inexpensive as possible, yet as luxury as he expects, to take him freely from A to B. And that can have a car, an eVTOL, a car to the helipad, to the vertiport, a VTOL to go to Farnborough, then the jet and the same on the French coast to get all the way to the villa. So it's really complementary to provide the best service for the client.
So good, Al, how long do we have? Some good questions coming in on the app. Actually, I can go about the first one. The other one. There's one about Skyscanner.
Lowering the cost. Again, we saw so far that electric-powered machines are being developed for 100, 200, 300 nautical miles. So it depends on how far, what your definition of regional airplane is. Yes, when it happens, it will be useful, but at the moment, we're still going to be using fossil fuel for medium and to long term.
So Toby, maybe Skyscanner is a better analogy than Uber. Can we learn from their model in business aviation?
Yeah, I'm a user of both products. I think they're great services. Probably. I mean, with Skyscanner, obviously, you have the airlines side by side, Air France, KLM, Virgin, British Airways. And in that respect, it's very similar to Victor. You know, if someone's flying 3 times a year, I would say, they're going to know the operator. They're probably going to know the tail number. You don't forget when you've been in a really nice jet because you want to go in it again and take guests, or just because it was so comfortable. So similar in that it's very transparent. You can see exactly who the operator is. I mean, with Victor, you can see the tail number of the aircraft. Obviously, you still don't have that customer service and human interaction paired with it, the high touch. But I think right now it's probably a better analogy than Uber. I think Uber's obviously, it was used at the beginning. It's probably a bit lazy to say you're the Uber of jets nowadays to anyone. I think it's fair to give brands their own pedestal within their industries. Does that help?
Yeah, that's good. Does anybody have any questions directly from the audience whilst Al puts up the next questions?
I'll take the sensitive one, democratize it by publishing your markup.
I was trying to avoid that one. But.
Oh, come on, let's have fun. Lunajets, we working in a margin of between 10 and 12% of markup with very controlled costs. So we've been profitable for the past 9 years, and I launched 10 years ago. First year is kind of difficult to be profitable. And this really stands us up from the competition. We're growing at 30% per year, and we are profitable. So it's a very comfortable position to be in. I don't have to raise money. I reinvest my money into the tech, into technology for the back office, and then for the consumer. Not trying to create the killer app, but it works. Other competitors may charge less and have much bigger costs, which means they're not profitable.
We're not profitable. And we don't per se publish our markup, but we do disclose who the operator is. So any Sava shopper could obviously go straight to them. We've been doing it since day one, and the reason we feel that we can do it without people going direct is simply because we feel we add enough value to the service we provide, whether that be client deposit accounts with HSBC, onshore, offshore, multi-currency, or indeed wanting to fly carbon neutral. There's just a couple of examples. You know, the moment you go direct, you may not get those benefits. Of course, the broker service too.
How many people? Sorry, gentleman there. How many people do go direct?
Less than 5%.
And why is that? Why? I mean,
I think there's always going to be a market for going directly to an operator. Look, if I only ever flew the same route and I knew that a local operator served it very well, and I always flew with the same pax load, why wouldn't I build a great relationship with an operator in Bristol who I know is going to fly me safely to Jersey and back every weekend? You know, there's no need. But of course, if I'm already doing that, and I suddenly see this new brand come in 2011, 2012 Victor, I might register and try it and see. But actually, there's little point, potentially.
So, gentleman there had a question.
Let me just reply. I think that savvy passengers will know that an operator's objective is to manage aircraft on behalf of owners. And the owners are their sole clients who are paying the bills at the end of the month, whatever. A charter passenger who just comes and charters 3 times a year, as you say, is not his bread and butter. So he has a conflict of interest with a passenger, a charter broker, insofar as he wants to protect his client. A charter broker will defend the passengers because that's our client and we don't have any other source of income. So that's the value that we, anyway, like to believe that we bring to the client. And if they go to an operator, yes, for, like Patrick said, for a Luton to Paris on the sunny Wednesday, before the 29th of March, should be no problem. But as soon as a variable of the many that they are goes wrong, then they're not being protected.
Sorry, gentlemen.
Right, yeah.
Eymeric, you're right that trying to be the Uber of aviation is quite a massive undertaking, and Uber itself is losing over $1 billion a quarter, so I'm not sure that's what people aspire to actually try to achieve. And just one point of clarification in that Stellar is not aspiring to be the Uber of aviation. It's really more of a B2B application to try to facilitate business for brokers and charter operators and all that. But the question that I have, though, is on stimulation. Dean Donovan mentioned on his panel that we really look at industries that can be stimulated by finding ways to improve efficiencies and all that. So just take as a given that somehow you could wind up creating a 20% reduction in cost. By how much do you think the industry would be stimulated? Do you think that it's relatively fixed, or do you think that it's highly receptive to lower prices to generate higher demand?
You have to compare us to, and some clients do that, to the first-class tickets. Okay, so the closer we get to first-class tickets, then the easier it will be for somebody to jump up and get into private aviation. It does happen, as Toby said, sometimes with empty leg flights, okay? And I'm very well positioned to tell you that empty legs don't work, because Lunajets was launched in 2008 as an empty leg listing, where empty leg, some people are not from the industry, and I had to explain this at lunchtime. An empty leg is a flight coming back home empty after taking a client somewhere. Okay, and Lunajets was a listing of a whole bunch of empty legs, and I was just hoping that people will go on, put their card, click, and I would see the money coming in. That doesn't happen. It's not a sustainable business. However, sometimes 1 in 10, the client gets lucky, and on his one-way flight, we do find an empty leg, like Toby did for Nice, Newark, and it works. And in that case, yes, you can be very close to first-class tickets if the plane has more than one passenger at least. But to mirror, yeah, so the closer you can get to that. But so far, I'm not seeing any cost reductions that are that important to make it happen.
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from sort of how to make that happen. But in the commercial space, at Volaris, what we've seen is that for each 1% reduction in price, the increase in demand is about 3 to 5%, somewhere in there. So it's a 3 to 5 to 1. And so I wasn't sure whether you had any sense of that if prices come down, that by 20%, that the overall aggregate demand would increase by 60% or 100% or whatever.
In private aviation, you have the word private, and it's very difficult for us to have data such as that, because already people don't even, our clients anyway, don't advertise that they're flying private, let alone how much they paid. You look at figures of air traffic control, and you see private jets, but you don't know if it's a net jet, if it's a charter plane, if it's an empty leg with no passengers on board, so it's very difficult to get data. So no, I don't have this. What I can tell you is in 2008, with the crisis, the prices came down really, really good. That was a good time to fly, except that nobody else had money, so that didn't work either.
Al's signaling to wrap up. So thanks very much to the panel. There's one question: what level of legal liability does a broker take on if something bad happens on a journey they booked? And I'd just like to say I'm capable of answering that question if anybody wishes to pay me to answer it. Sadly, no one pays me enough to actually be able to afford to fly on a private aircraft. That's the sob story for today. Talking about democratizing private aviation, unfortunately, I don't think law firm partners are going to be the future for the future demographic of business jets. And I see the smallest violin weeping in the audience.
Aim for the stars.
Got to stuff. So thanks very much, Toby, Andy, and Eymeric. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark, you might not get to fly on a private jet, but I think we're going to break for 10 minutes so you can have a coffee. We're going to break for 10 minutes, then come straight back in for freight, which I know is a highly anticipated session. And then we've got some really good announcements you want to stay around for.